All right. I am General War Thunder, author of Infinite Realities of Jean Arc. This is going to be a new series I'm trying. It's where I review fanfictions, and if I can, get an interview with the author. Since me and it's A.S.G have been working together for a long time. We've been he was the first choice. Right now, we're going over one of my personal favorites of his. It's called Bring You Sunshine, and here we go. If you wanted to start off, like, what was your idea for this?
Okay, so 2017 was basically when I wrote most of my Ruby fanfics. That was me just going through one idea after another. Before that, I had written a story called The Sun in the Night about John, Yang, and Raven, and kind of a love triangle, but not quite. And that got me thinking about the different ideas of how a relationship would function. And one of the popular genres of the time, I don't know if it's still as popular today, but I definitely still see it pretty frequently, is a John harem. And I wanted to do something like that, but also something a little bit different that didn't quite fit the same mold. A lot of harem stories run the same kind of gamut where they have a character who just endlessly cycles through as many as one girl every single chapter. And I didn't think that was realistic or entertaining. So I wanted to write something about John entering a relationship with multiple women at once, but also portraying it in a kind of more grounded and realistic way. And some of my friends on Discord suggested their favorite John ships, like Silent Night was particularly popular, so John and Neo, and I love writing Neo, so I was completely on board with that. And Pyrrha was an obvious choice because she was already interested in John canonically. And Blake was the last one that I decided upon at the time because another character that I liked writing and also a pretty popular ship from people on Discord. So I said, okay, I'll go with it.
Yes. No, like, can't think of it real quick, but I do remember the Raven one. I've only read that one once. That was very interesting. I remember you saying once a while ago that you like to do the genre ships that don't really have a lot of light because like I do know that well at least for me I don't see a lot of Nightingale or I think that's what Blake and John is called.
I've always liked Nightshade personally.
Okay, well I don't know the ship names off the top of my head or a lot of the ship names, but this was
Uh, well, I mean, I've seen it a couple times long before I started. I mean, that's probably still my favorite color fic is One Good Turn Deserves Another, which is a Nightshade story.
well, let's look at them right now.
It's just that the two barely interact in canon, so I mean, we don't have a lot to play off of there.
It is true. Like,
But yeah, when it comes to any Ruby pairing, I don't really want to write the conventional ones. Like, I've definitely written Bumblebee before, and I treat it as canon in my more recent stories, but I don't particularly like writing Bumblebee just because it's been done by everybody and their mother. It's not interesting to me because there isn't a lot of ground to cover that hasn't already been taken care of by other writers.
mm-hmm.
And other ships like Arcos, I put into a lot of my stories because I use canon sources, and Pyrrha was canonically interested in John, so it has to be something that I write word to and incorporate.
Mm.
But when it comes to any ship that I want to write, I usually want to write something that either hasn't been done before or something that personally interests me. Like my personal favorite ships are Ninjas of Love, which is Blake and Ren, and Baked Alaska, which is Yang and Neo. And these are all characters that I like and like interacting with each other, but also would be considered crack pairings compared to more conventional ones.
Right. I just uh, I just remember doing Ninjas of Love once, and a lot of people were really turned off by the idea. But um,
Well, you broke up probably the two most popular ships, Bumblebee and Renora.
right,
Yeah,
but
that's the
that's an occupational hazard when you do like stuff like this. Well, like what about this or what about this? Like obviously, if you do one ship, like the other half of the fandom's gonna call for your head.
yeah, and that definitely happened when I was writing it. And that story about Blake and Ren it has its popularity, but it's way, way less than what you get with a John story.
It's a very niche audience.
Yeah. And when I wrote like Ren and Ty as leads in different stories, and they're just nowhere near as popular as John. They don't get as much traction. So if you want to measure your stories by how many readers are invested in them, make John the lead. You'll get a lot more.
All right. Well, now on to the actual story itself. It begins. It begins where most fics like to start in the Beacon arc, but this one is particularly later. It's the end of Volume One, beginning of Volume Two, where John is helping them try to find Blake when she's missing. But I, when I first read it, what immediately hooked me was John obviously goes to the wrong dock. That was very funny to me.
I think that he always means well, and everyone understands that. But if we're talking about season or volume one, John, we're talking about someone who still doesn't quite get it and is still trying to figure things out.
Mm.
So he wants to help, but he doesn't have any idea where to go. And as we learn in later volumes, he's not actually from Vale, so he wouldn't necessarily know where anything is.
Right. And that's where we meet number one, Neo, the first one of this pairing. And it's interesting. Like, obviously, Neo is protecting the stash from the White Fang. Jean thinks she's being attacked by them and runs to her defense.
Well, at this point in the series, the White Fang are basically the only villains that anyone knows about. I'm pretty sure that Ruby is the only one who actually knows Torchwick's name at this point. She's the only one who saw him on the news report. Everyone else doesn't know who he is. But they do
Well,
know the White Fang. They have heard about their terrorist attacks.
mm,
They go to a police cordon and they suspect the White Fang. It was
mm,
important for John and Neo to meet early on because Neo was going to take a very long time to warm to him. I consider this may just be my headcanon, but I'm pretty sure that Neo doesn't trust easily. I think that that's a pretty common interpretation of her character. So she needed to build that up with John from the start.
right.
And there needed to be some tension between Torchwick and the White Fang because they've always been an alliance of convenience. They've always been working together only because of a mutual goal and because of Cinder's direct instruction that they do so.
Was it their mutual goal? Because this might be my headcanon, but I always thought like it was a very gun to the head situation.
Well, they both want to destabilize the current regime, so they have some common ground. In Torch's case, it's basically just to make it easier to steal things, but in the White Fang's case, they're actually aiming for political changes. When Cinder just kind of consolidates both those motives.
Mm-hmm.
But suffice to say, the White Fang think that Torchuk and Neo are trying to screw them, and they fight and they argue, and Neo does as she does and beats them up.
Yeah,
John, of course,
very
John just sees this short girl being attacked by terrorists and tries to help.
because he wants to be the hero as
Yeah.
always.
And I
But
think that, yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry. Well, no, because I mean they've already have a distrust because they're human, so like them attacking Neo like really wouldn't take much prodding.
No, not at all. And that's always been the theme with the villains is that they're very loosely held together. by one motivation or another. And in Neo's case, I didn't want her to like become good. I think it's a bit of a cliche for her to be undergo a heel face turn.
Mm-hmm.
But I did want her to have that nuance of wanting something other than just being a criminal all the time. And you see some of that in her interactions with Roman, where they're actively planning to take the money and run before things go south because they don't actually care about the politics at all.
Mm-hmm.
At the very least, they make a contingency to get out of town with their stash. But obviously, canon plays out as it will, and we don't get that for them.
Mm-hmm. And then moving on, this is a side of Pyrrha that I like seeing, where a lot of fics that I've read, she is just like in canon, where she's a very Mary Sue, but I do like the direction that you went in this, where she is, but at the same time she's also very insecure because she's always worrying about John, and later on she does betray his trust, which I like seeing. It's like I don't like seeing like out of character, but I do like seeing their character expanded, if that makes sense.
I think that it's not so much that Pyrrha is worse than she is in canon as that it's a very understandable and relatable flaw for Pyrrha to be a little bit bothered that John is working so hard to help another pretty girl. And she's trying not to be jealous. She doesn't like this side of herself, but it exists. And it's something that exists in all of us, where we worry about whether or not someone we like has an ulterior motive for helping someone else. And it's a natural reaction. It's part of our evolutionary psychology.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Though. That's why I like it. Versus in the show, she's like a saint. She sacrifices her personal needs or wants, I guess, for Jean to pursue Weiss. But in this one, she is jealous, and she shows that, and she's like she tries to like not really control, but she does try to like wedge herself uh in with John a little more forcefully this go around.
And this is still meant to adhere to canon for the first two volumes. Before we get to volume three, there's any actual change in the plot.
Right.
And a lot of it is what we would see taking place off screen. So I'm just like, I don't think Pyrrha is nice 100% of the time. I think that everyone has their good days and bad. And I wanted that nuance to be present with her. So she is still very devoted to him and still sincere in her interest in him. It's just that she's also dealing with constant failure, and that does wear on her.
Mm-hmm. And I believe they're I believe they did they meet up. Sorry, it's been a minute. I believe they meet up at this so at the climax has an ice cream shop, but they go there before, right? That's an established place.
So, yeah, John and Neo go to that ice cream parlor because this is Neo and she likes to eat ice cream.
Mm-hmm. I always
And it,
considered it like, or the way I visualize it, it's like the shop from the malt shop from Greece.
I didn't have any like specific location in mind. I mean, most ice cream parlors have the same kind of setup with nicely tiled floors, swivel chairs.
Oh yeah, no, like, but no, that's what I'm saying though. It's like it was just for me because there was uh there was a shop just like this in the town I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, that was just for me. Like, it just came to my head because like, oh, that shop. I've also seen it in movies because I like to watch movies about the 50s. So.
Okay. But yeah, I wanted to set up the location because I knew I was going to use it later.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't particularly like things that just kind of come out of nowhere. I mean, this has been one of my recent complaints about more recent volumes about Ruby, where I feel like certain ideas and locations just kind of come out of the blue.
Mm-hmm.
I like it when things are set up and laid, the groundwork is laid early.
Mm-hmm. Right. I prefer that to happen as well. And then later on, the breach initially happens, which Roman, uh, I believe he orders, like, I believe this is where it starts to, like, diverge, not really a lot, but, like, as soon as, when Raven, saves Yang from Neo, and when she disappears and finds John, if I'm remembering correctly.
So Torchwick ordering the start of the breach early is already something that happens in Volume 2. They go
Right.
off plan, off kilter. But what changes from Volume Two's ending is that John leaves a little bit early,
Mm-hmm.
which I felt like I could still kind of fudge into canon as something that took place off screen because we just kind of leave that scene so abruptly.
Right.
And he goes off with Neo, and we don't know about Juniper at this point because Volume 2 ends with us focusing on Team Ruby and Zwei, and they're hanging out
Mm-hmm.
on the cliffside.
Right. But and this is one of those behind the scenes moments where
Oh yeah, I rely on that quite a lot when it comes to writing at Beacon. Things that happened either off screen or things that happened during the 2 week break between Volume 2 and Volume 3.
oh yeah, no, I do the same thing. But okay, now this I remember very vividly for a reason I will obviously say in a minute.
Okay.
So obviously Neo watches Roman get captured, and right now she feels totally alone, and she's scared, terrified, and she messages Jean, who she can also see in town, and they meet up, much to Pierre's dismay. And well,
Yeah.
also, it happens. Like the old devil's tango.
Yeah, these crazy kids, they do these things. I knew that I wanted Neo to be the first one to get there because I didn't think it would be in character for Pyrrha to be quite so direct with it.
Mm-hmm.
And in Blake's case, she's still working through her issues with Adam, which is something that I mentioned in several chapters before this.
Oh,
And
that I totally forgot about Blake's scene with Jean in front of the fountain.
yeah, when she mistakes his concern for another quiet girl he knows.
Mm-hmm, with her.
Yeah.
And she overreads the situation because he's obviously talking about Neo in the way she describes it, but it's not really conceited, but she does think it's her,
Yeah.
and she makes a move on him.
Yeah. And Blake's interest in him is something that's a little bit faster than I wanted it to go for chapter 5. But I think that it worked well enough with her emotional state following volume 1's ending, following her issues with Sun going back and forth on how she felt about him. She was in a strange place of trying to figure out what to do, and she started acting impulsively.
Well, I thought it was really well paced, and the fact that she doesn't like pursue it, like she does it, but she's immediately embarrassed, and then like always runs away from it. I thought that was perfect, or the way it was.
Okay, well, I'm glad you liked it. I'm just saying that it moved a little bit quickly because I wanted it to be kind of emotional and unpredictable. And if that worked, then I'm glad that it succeeded for you.
Mm. And now we're back to what we were previously saying, where
Neo and John in chapter 7. And
the devil's tango.
yeah, well, for Neo, I felt like it would be a much easier thing for her to take that leap because she attempted to do so before with Torchwick, and he just did not accept it because he wasn't interested in that kind of relationship with her, at least in this canon.
Mm-hmm.
And Neo forms a similar attachment to John and attempts the same thing, and he, in this case, reciprocates.
Mm-hmm. But I don't think he knows why, though. Obviously, she's put her trust in him, but I'm pretty sure he's more like he's a 17-year-old kid. I mean, I
Yeah,
remember how I was at 17.
exactly. He's a 17-year-old boy, and this very beautiful woman kisses him, starts undressing, and he reacts as I'm pretty sure most 17-year-old boys would react.
Exactly. And now starts the inevitable downfall, which has always been interesting to me. This part is kind of not this part, little parts after. But obviously, Jean wants to. He takes a picture of her, and she's not in a disguise, so she obviously freaks out, and he sends it to her because he wants to share this moment with her. Being, he's trying to be a romantic, and she understands then, but obviously she didn't want evidence of her being a fugitive and a criminal.
Well, she had never considered it before. She'd never been in a relationship with someone where they would, take pictures and remember specific times of their lives together. So it's something that's very alien to her at the time. It's only after she realizes why he did it and what purpose it serves that she's able to calm down.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah, she's.
Then
I
I
mean,
totally misread the situation. Then
she's
I thought
still.
it. I thought it was because she didn't want like evidence or photos of her. Like
Well,
she was trying to.
that's also a relevant factor. It's she does care about the possibility of someone identifying her, which is why when she and John are out and about, she's not disguised as anyone, but she's also keeping a relatively low profile.
Right.
But again, it boggles her mind because she's never done it before. She's never had a boyfriend or gone out on a date or had a picture taken of the two of them. These are all things that she needs to learn.
Right. And then comes the the spark of the whole powder keg, because obviously Pyrrha calls him and she knows, like she knows what happened as soon as he like said where he was and who he was with for the entire night. She can connect the dots. Like a lot of fiction writes her as this love struck moron, but she's not. She can read the situation.
Yeah. And when John gets back to his dorm to reunite with his team, Pyrrha has to put on that appearance of being interested in this. And she really does not want him to talk about it, but she has to be his friend and puts on her act and tells him to go on about it.
And then was it after they reunite when Yang and Blake talk to Pyrrha, or was it before? I think it was after.
It's after, yeah. Before John gets back to the dorm, he's noticed by Blake and Yang, who also pick up on his mannerisms and realize what happened.
Well, Yang notices the mannerisms. I thought Blake smelt a woman's perfume on him, or did I misread it? But yes, they do notice how he's obviously changed.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of details that. Blake smells a scent, which is described as feminine, which I hadn't meant to be perfume, just, different, something that she notices a difference to.
Right.
Yeah. And in Yang's case, she's just like, hey, what's going on with John? He seems unusually confident.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, when Blake and Yang do go and talk to Pyrrha about it,
that's when they talk about Neo on the train, and that's when Pyrrha connects the dots about who he's been talking about, and this is like I said, this is the part that I like and found most interesting, is because what she does when she snoops in his phone
Yeah,
and sends a picture of Neo to Blake and Yang for the inevitable climax,
yeah.
or the first climax. I rephrase.
And this is a large sticking point for a lot of readers about this action Pyrrha takes and whether or not it's forgivable or not. And I think that that's telling of people's character. Because in John's case, I don't see how he would ever not forgive Pyrrha, even if this does hurt and sting him a lot. I don't think of it as being out of character for him to be able to overlook this, or at least understand it. Because while it's a act of betrayal and mistrust, it is also something that he does come to understand. Because in chapter 9, when we go over to the apartment with John and Pyrrha, we see the weight of all of Neo's actions coming to him. And while Neo may have not wronged him personally, she does routinely break the law and has hurt his friends. So he has to deal with that reality too.
I agree. It is his character to forgive her. I think though that he did it too quickly. Like I think he would have still been in his high state of what just happened, and who, like, he's had this relationship with her. They've taken it to the next level. I think he would be very emotional and wouldn't have forgiven her that quickly.
We have that little scene immediately after the clash between Blake and Yang versus Neo, where Blake tries to talk to him and John is just saying, "Not now. I can't do this now."
Mm.
So there is meant to be a little bit of gap of time there where he is still in that state and unable to deal with it.
Mm.
And then when they get back to Beacon, that's when he talks to Blake and Pyrrha about it. And yeah, it may have been too quick, but it was meant to be a few hours later.
Right. And now, this part is what like like I said, it didn't turn me off. I didn't stop reading, but it was a moment that stuck out for me. It's when Jean and Neo have a moment, but Neo lies to him, where Jean asks if any of it was real. She lies, obviously, and runs away. The thing that stuck out to me is like, obviously what you said earlier. She's very hard to trust someone, or she's very hard in trusting someone. At the same time, though, it's like, why didn't she take the opportunity to try to explain it? Like,
She
use
was
her semblance to take him, because I'm pretty sure Pyrrha was there, but why didn't she use her semblance to take him away and, like, explain the situation? Maybe, like, not like take him away, but maybe like to the roof or a different room or
at
a
that
different
point.
apartment.
At that point, the only one who was neutralized was Yang. Blake and Pyrrha were still up, and John himself was also armed. So
Mm-hmm.
she wasn't sure which way he was going to go with him. And she was also feeling betrayed by thinking that he was in some way part of the setup and was going back and forth on how to respond to it. And ultimately, she returned to what she knew and put up her front of just being a criminal.
Right.
And yeah,
Wait,
you can
really?
argue
She thought Jean was in on it. I
in
thought
chapter
the
in
scene. I thought the scene at the ice cream shop made his stance very known,
yeah,
because he's questioning them, like,
yeah,
"What are you doing?"
in chapter 8 she goes through that initial shock of thinking that he's set her up. In chapter 9 we get the clarification from John that he has no idea what's going on.
But
But
at that point, she had already escaped.
Yeah, and Neo is still going through Tortwick's lessons. It's a recurring theme of the story that she never believe, never trust, and never hope for anything anyone tells her to be real. And she's falls back on that lesson when she feels burned by him.
Right. Because okay, yeah. Now it's coming back because I had forgotten she had run away, and she didn't know, or like we knew as the audience that he had nothing to do with it, but she had run away before he could actually say that.
Yep.
And then and this is the end, and to end this mini climax, she obviously goes back to Cinder, and that's where volume 3 starts.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to touch on before we get to that is the conversation between John and Blake afterwards.
Where he snaps at her, and then immediately recoils.
Yep.
Because obviously he's very emotional. He doesn't mean it. Well, he does mean it, but it's... I don't even know what to say to that.
Well, Blake is the ideal person to talk to about this because she also mentions what she went through with Adam, how she was in love with someone once and didn't want to see that he had become a bad person. And it was something that she was trying to relate to with him. And at this point in the story, it very firmly pushes John towards Blake rather than towards Pyrrha or towards Neo.
Mm.
And that direction was important to take for the pacing of the story because we had that brief spurt of John and Blake in chapter 5, and then the next few chapters are her just trying to move past it, almost pretend it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But then we get back to this point and re-solidify how she feels, that she does care about him and is, at least to some point, interested in her.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then in chapter 10, we start volume 3 proper with a big time skip after a brief moment where I felt was necessary for reality to ensue. John talks to Ozpin about it, and they sort things out with the local authorities and don't make it a big issue. We then jump way ahead to the Vital Festival tournament. And we jump all the way to Yang's issues with Mercury and the fight there. And that was something that some readers had some issue with because there is such a huge jump in time. We go about 16, 17 days from where we were before.
Well, I mean, there's not really much to address. I mean, I guess you could explain like their infiltration of the festival, introducing their 4th team member.
Mm-hmm.
But this is really, it doesn't really add to it, I guess.
What was important was to show Cinder and Neo's alliance, and we didn't need to see any more of it than that.
Right.
Just that she went to finally reveal her identity to Cinder and to team up with her to get Roman back. She was focused entirely on that and not whatever romance she had with John before.
Right.
And the focus then became on John and Blake and their relationship. At this point, I kind of had the idea at the time of this being somewhere around 12 or 13 chapters rather than the 15 it ended up being.
Mm-hmm.
Because for a while there, this story was still going to end canonically. It was going to end with the fall of Beacon, Blake running away, Neo disappearing, Pyrrha dying. It was going to end tragically. It was going to end with all of this not going the way it went to plan.
Mm.
But we're not to that point yet. So when we're on pace here, we have to jump ahead a little bit to get to that point where we have the conversation between Pyrrha and John in Destiny, and While he's recovering from the wound that Pyrrha unintentionally gave him, Blake comes to visit his dorm, and they start talking, and they acknowledge that sometimes they just react emotionally to things and interact again. And of course, Pyrrha shows up at exactly the wrong time to see that happen.
Mm. And then I do like this one section because I'm going along with the chapters on my phone as we're talking. I do like this section where Jean is he's trying to find the right words to send to Pyrrha, but he keeps erasing them.
Yeah.
Before eventually just going.
Yeah. And I think it's something that a lot of people have gone through if they've ever been in a problem situation with a friend or a loved one where they're trying to go through what it's saying, and they type it out, they erase it, they type something different out, then they think about it and realize it's not the way to go, and they keep working on it. And because so much conversation in this story is texting between scrolls, that it gives us time for that introspection, and we learn a little bit more about John's character, which is always nice.
Being like a normal teenager and drinking problems away.
I don't think they allow alcohol at Beacon, but Crow is there now, so maybe.
I feel like as teenagers they would like getting it wouldn't be hard because when I was in high school that happened a lot. Like it was easy to get a hold of it.
I'm sure that they could. I didn't incorporate it into the story in any way because I didn't want to repeat myself. We already had a kind of drunken hookup in my last story before this one.
Right.
Yeah.
It was that's actually one thing that's always like just bothered me about like I think anime in anime in general is like drinking and the drunken character like is played for comedy and for laughs, but smoking is like contraband. Like in One Piece they changed his cigarette into a lollipop. I'm just like,
Yeah, that
why
was
is that such a why is smoking such a taboo but drinking isn't? I mean they're both addictive and they're both vices and they're not really, something that should be played for kids, but like why is it like why is there such a double standard?
I mean, Ruby eventually gives us a active consequence for alcoholism, so not necessarily a bad thing. It's played for laughs in Volume 3, but by Volume 6, it's an actual problem that is a hindrance to people.
Right.
So, in Ruby's case, I'm fine with it because it doesn't really portray smoking as a bad thing so much as it's just the bad guys who happen to be doing it.
Mm-hmm. Like I had a commission work done and Ruby had a cigarette and everybody went nuts. Like, whoa, that was not what I was expecting. But not off topic. Back to looks like actually it starts. Like we're still in the chapter where Blake kisses John and uh, she meets up with Weiss, and then it actually I think this chapter ends with the fall beginning.
No, the chapter 10 ends with that cliffhanger of Pyrrha noticing them. Then chapter 11 is when we get to the John texting scene, and Weiss and Blake go out for tea, and the fall starts.
Yeah, I'm on. Okay, yeah, I'm on 11 right now. I just got to the bottom. That's where he's in the locker and Neo's back.
Yeah. So this chapter was when I decided to diverge from canon and completely rework how it was all going to play out. At this point, I had lost control over what I had planned out in my plan draft and decided to just kind of wing it a little bit, for better or for worse. And this major change happens when Neo immediately leaves from landing after being thrown off the airship and ends up where Adam, Yang, and Blake are, and we get our first divergent from canon.
Mm.
Because Neo does also blame not only Ruby Rose for Tortrix's death, but also Cinder and her allies. And she never liked the White Fang to begin with.
Right.
So she intercedes in that fight and attacks Adam.
But not, at this point, it's all purely selfish because not only does she attack Adam, but like she also notices Blake there, so it's like, oh, you stole my boyfriend. Well, not stole, but she's part of the reason why.
Yeah, and she does chase after Blake and Yang specifically to harm them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only after that she finds John in the locker.
Right. Like she does want to follow through with her revenge, but obviously that doesn't happen.
Yeah, she sees John and Pyrrha. Pyrrha kisses John, and she reacts poorly to this time.
Yep.
And because all of my plans were off course at this point, I was just kind of riding by the seat of my pants every couple of days. Like, all right, so what happens now?
Just improv it.
Yeah. And in order to get Neo to understand, we have to give her fresher meat. And John, again, tries to get people to calm down, but at this point, Neo is just not having it because she's already been betrayed and lost the only other person she trusted.
Mm-hmm.
So John, instead of trying to appeal to romance or their past together, instead just wants Neo to focus her attention on Cinder because Cinder is also her enemy. And he reminds them of all that happened in the story before about Blake being willing to trust John and lower her gun and not attack Neo, and John acknowledging that Pyrrha betrayed his trust before, and that John had only ever meant that image for himself and Neo.
Right.
But he did at some point want to share it with his friends to show them, hey, this is my girlfriend. Y'all should like her. Pyrrha understandably asks why Neo wouldn't just attack them when their backs are turned. And John points out that, I'm sorry, not John, Blake points out that Neo didn't kill Yang when she had the chance, though they don't actually know the reason
They don't know the reason why.
Yeah. And Neo decides to tactfully say that she wanted to kill the leader of the White Fang instead of Yang. And Blake has to go through the process of Adam's death, and the four leads of the story form their little impromptu alliance as a result.
Mm. Which is the building block for something greater.
And at this point, I'm like, okay, so it's 4-on-1, so we have a reasonable explanation for why we might be able to actually beat Cinder.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, we find a way to make things work by making the characters understand each other through the power of the Maiden's magic and how it separates. And my reasoning for this was that Maiden magic had already been split in half by Cinder before and had been diluted further into Pyrrha by the transfer process that started in Volume 3. And because it had been separated for such a long period of time, it was divided even further and further unstable.
You have a question about the fight, though. Were you going off of the canon or what should have been? Like, I remember, like, there was this big uproar with Shane's letter, how it was supposed to be Pyrrha does beat Cinder, but because of Jean, he gets her killed.
I didn't really think too much about the power levels of the characters involved. I was thinking more in terms of what I had seen in canon from Volume 3,
Okay.
that Cinder would have beaten Pyrrha if it had just been the two of them.
Right.
Because Cinder does control the fight for the most part. She's only killed because Neo attacks her from behind.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, the maiden, or the power of the maiden it's basically a Horcrux.
Yeah.
It it just gets torn even more. Which,
And because it's torn apart into three separate places and still tries to reunite, we have the situation where Blake, Neo, and Pyrrha all kind of exchange information between each other and start experiencing each other's memories with themselves in the place of the other. And this allows us to actually make Neo finally understand how the other two feel
mm-hmm.
and realize that she can actually trust John because she's now able to see him from another perspective and understand the context for why things happened.
Mm-hmm. Does that mean they experience the devil's tango as well?
I didn't want this to be in any way like explicit.
Well, yeah,
I,
I know. Like, it was
I,
just.
but the idea was that they all experienced each other's memories and perspectives and understood each other in such a way as Neo never had before. And while she didn't quite trust them, she did at least understand their perspective and was willing to go along with it.
Right.
They all felt the same way about John. And at that, they had a common bond.
Right. And I don't remember if this was said, but I remember when I was doing my end game and I was bringing in multiple fanfics that the sort of back and forth that we had, uh, you told me that the three couldn't stand to be apart because it would actually physically wound them. But I don't
Yeah.
remember if it was actually said in the fanfic canon.
In the story itself, we get to that point at the very end of the story where the three kind of have to be in relative proximity to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we get this hinted at where Blake is feeling it when she's apart from Pyrrha and Neil, while Pyrrha's being talked to by Glinda and Ironwood, and while Neo is off doing her own thing.
Mm-hmm. And then, well, obviously in the fall, it still technically happens, but most of it is
The characters that we care about are still
exactly.
alive, basically.
So, and then with this, I guess a little epilogue would be where they. No, I take that back because the main story is still going, but a little detour is Jean and Neo investigating the crashed command ship
because she does need that closure about
right.
Torchwick. She does need to know that he's gone and that this is her life now.
Exactly. And that was I don't I want to say I enjoyed it because like there's like that's not a scene to like be like I enjoy Neo crying. No, it's like I thought it was good because there's not you spend enough time on it, you don't like dwell on it. There's no like big speech. There's just a moment with her and John. Like she's accepting it and he's there for her. Like
Yeah.
and then we move. Because
And
a
it
lot
was
of fanfics I read, they try to dole it out, or they have like this emotional speech, or like it gets overplayed or overdone. I guess no, that's not the word.
well, Neo, by all measures, is subtle. She's not going to give a speech. She can't give a speech.
Right.
And in John's case, I wanted him to become more tactful as the story went on and he understood the ladies better.
Mm-hmm.
so he would respond accordingly for the situation for each of them. And in Neo's case, she just really needed someone to latch onto and hug right then.
Right. And now the final part. Now this obviously came before we knew what the relics definitively were, what they did, and the spirits, because obviously the relic of choice is
Not
not
in
what it is.
Ozpin's cane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also it it opens and it gives it looks like the solar system, right?
Well, there's my original idea was actually again a Harry Potter reference. I was thinking of the Resurrection Stone from the Deathly Hallows.
Mm-hmm.
That was my visual inspiration for it. But the idea with the Relic of Choice was, hey, we've got a Fall Maiden and she's holding Ozpin's cane, so she should logically be able to open it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember it was the jewel on the end. It started to spin, and there was I, but that's just me. I was thinking more sci-fi, and it looked like a galaxy map, so that just opened, and then immediately closed. But
the idea here was to give us basically the last temptation of Neo about the Relic of Choice being able to control people's minds and thus make it
removing their
possible.
choice.
Yeah, making it possible for her to know for certain that she would have the love of her boyfriend and not be challenged by anyone else for his affection.
Right.
She could have John and she could cut Pyrrha and Blake out just by using this relic. And all she has to do is give it to Salem when she's done.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that that's not really what Neo wants. She doesn't want to use this power because she doesn't really care about the magic or the fight between Salem and Ozpin. It can't bring Torchwick back. And she does now actually believe that John loves her, and she doesn't need that confirmation anymore. And she completes her character arc.
Mm-hmm. And not only does she have Jean, she has two others.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's Bringing You Sunshine. It's over 100,000 words, 15 chapters, averaging about 6K a chapter, which is relatively average for a chapter. I've seen chapters that have 10, 20,000 a chapter. I'm just like, how do you even do that? I didn't even read through that. I get tired.
Yeah, I do think that sometimes a story can be too long. And if my chapters are more than 10,000 words, it's because there was a lot left to cover that I hadn't gotten to.
Right.
That happened to me with a more recent story, One and the Same, where the last two chapters were both over 10,000 words because there was just so much left to cover.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had paced it a little better, I probably would have just extended it to 22 chapters, but I was dead set on making it 20.
Mm-hmm. Right. Like I said in the previous podcast, a chapter is as long as it needs to be,
Yeah.
but you got to know when to stop.
And generally speaking, I like that number between about 5,000 and 8,000 words, which is my sweet spot.
I try to keep it under 10. My wedding story is well over 30K, and I was like, I could have stopped. I could have rereading it. There are times where I could have broken it up here and expanded on certain elements here, but I just wasn't thinking about that. But yeah, no, now, ever since I started getting taking writing classes, 5 to 6 has been my goal, and it's been working out. A Maiden Out of Time, all of those chapters have been at least 5K.
Yeah. Then for the very end of Bring You Sunshine, I I'm thinking up a team name for our four leads of John, Neo, Blake, Pyrrha.
I believe
And
Nora said it's PB&J.
it was actually Yang who came up with PB&J, but yeah. And I wanted to demonstrate that life was going to go on for them, and
Right.
that Neo has now enrolled in Beacon, and she's kind of acclimating to the life as a student and putting her skills to good use.
Mm-hmm.
And now Pyrrha, Blake, and Neo are working out how they spend their time with John and how they share him and how they can realistically make their relationship work. We don't go into too much detail about that, but just enough to show that their adventures aren't over. It's just that this story is.
I can just imagine Ren. But that's not a color. It's cute. Shut up.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and that's one of the things that I enjoyed about it, because it is a harem, yes, but it's not the usual. Um, he's like, okay, he's like a total sex god, and it's just like they fall at their feet, or they fall at his feet. I mean, or he's just like, he just does this one thing, and immediately they're in love. It's just like, okay, please stop. Like, uh, there's a fic, uh, the Dragon Contractor. I don't know if you've heard of that one, but
No, not familiar.
yeah, it's like he tries to do it, but in the end, it becomes he's perfect. He's a sex god. Like I like he tried it, it missed, but he kept going with it. Like, and it's kind of iffy. Like, I'm trying to do it because of, like I say, he's trying, but at the same time though, it's like I don't think a lot, because there's this scene where Pyrrha just sits on his lap and starts making out with him in front of everybody. I'm just like, that's, even in a harem story, that's a little much.
Yeah, I get that. And there are a lot of Ruby stories that just aren't to my taste either. If I like a premise, I'll usually go along with it. And if I don't, I'll probably move on and not read it.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of ships that I just don't care for. And when it comes to writing a harem fic, I'm currently working on one, and it is a lot more detailed than normal because there is a lot of work that needs to be done to make it possible for characters to interact in such a way where a relationship with multiple parties works. Otherwise, it starts to fall apart. And that was something I wanted to portray in my most recent story, Good Boy, that it doesn't always go to plan and it doesn't always work the way it's supposed to.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
No,
when it comes to
I understand that people like that whole thing because they can just like put themselves in John's situation, but it's not, you know, entertaining. I could do that.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, anyone could write a story where characters have sex, but when it comes to their interactions, how did we get there? That's the interesting part, at least for me.
Now, I understand. Like, I was actually that way for a long time. It's like, oh, all right, they're together and they're banging. But then as you read on and you find out like more than 90% is just that, it's like, okay, this is getting kind of boring.
Yeah, eventually it does get old. Eventually it does wear thin.
Like,
And
and then
in my
that's
story,
actually how I discovered this. It's like, oh, it's a harem. Oh, they're actually working to make their relationship work. This is different. This is enjoyable. I like this.
well, in this point in my stories, I had, for the last like five of them, they had, all involved sex in one way or another, but at all times there were reasons and consequences for it. And this is the result.
Right.
That
But it
sometimes it complicates life in a way that is unexpected.
right. and it's like it's there, but that's it. Like there are, I've read some where it's like, all right, it's there. I'm going to describe every single detail. Like we don't need that. There's plenty just like that. Just
this story is teen rated, so I couldn't be too explicit in it. So we see the beginning and then we see the morning after, and we get some allusion to what happened, but we don't go into detail.
yeah, like even though I have M-rated stories, it's like it. I try to heavily imply it versus just going into detail. Except for my one, but that's a story for another time.
Yeah, another time. All right. So, did you have any questions you wanted to ask about the story in particular?
I'm pretty sure we've covered everything I've asked and answered. That's
Okay, cool.
all right. This has been the first interview with a stereotypical gamer. He has other stories I plan to interview him on as well, but that will become that will be later. Can't even do the outro right. Jesus. All right, and